Ginny and Aj would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land across the countries now known as Australia and the United States of America. These lands that were never ceded but violently stolen from the oldest living cultures and civilization on this planet. We would also like to pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging, for they hold the memories, traditions, culture, and hopes of a brighter future for us all. It's also important that we acknowledge the Gumaroi, Barkinji, Lachi Lachi, Birigubba, and Waka Waka ancestors and elders of our bloodlines, whose shoulders we stand on. Without them, we do not exist. It's through them that we carry our pride, strength, and resiliency. We must always remember that under this concrete and asphalt, these countries were and always will be on traditional Aboriginal, Australian, and Native American land.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back for Season 2, Episode 2 of Unapologetically Black. As usual, it is an absolute honor to be able to share our stories and share our insights with you all. But this episode is very different than anything both Ginny and I have ever done. We are going to be having an in-depth conversation and yarn with my co-host Ginny here today. I'm very excited to embark on this journey with you all. But before we do, I want to provide a trigger warning. This conversation will delve into topics of domestic violence, drug abuse or use, and sexual abuse. This is really important to navigate that in this moment, and it's your decision if you wish to engage with this episode, but if not, we'll for sure catch up with you in the next one. So as I was saying, this is an opportunity. This episode is an opportunity for me to be able to interview Ginny. I'm absolutely honored to be able to do this. Ginny is a woman of many talents. She's a business owner, but also an Indigenous artist. And watching her grow on her journey over the last 12 months, again, has been an honor. But what we're going to be exploring with Ginny today is her early beginnings. As you've seen, the title of this episode is called Foster Care to Fashion. And that is exactly what we're going to be talking about. So we hope that this will be a safe space and a welcoming space. And wherever you are listening in, understand that this topic is very personal for Ginny today. So before we kick off, I would like to ask you, Ginny, one of our first questions is, what has encouraged you to take this brave leap? Because as we were yarning about before, you've never opened up and shared these chapters of your life and your journey. What's been the inspiration behind it?
I think honestly for me, it's just been a whole lot of growth that's happened in the last, I want to say like 2 years, pretty much since I started my business, Ginny's Girl Gang, and been able to, I guess, have lots of conversations with lots of different people, but also deal with, now that, being away from Australia, being away from home, it's left me with quite a bit of time on my hands and a lot of thinking, a lot of memories being provoked, a lot of, a lot of conversations that I've been able to have by myself and to myself. And I think that even with you, AJ, like us being able to do this podcast, I think has inspired me a little bit more to talk about topics that are important to us. And I think topics that I think a lot of our people, Black, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander people will be able to relate to. So I don't know, I just thought it's not something that I have talk about a lot about my life, because I think there's a huge part of me that is probably embarrassed about where I've come from. But also, I don't want anyone to look at me and think like, oh, I feel sorry for her, because that's not, I guess, not a position that I necessarily work from.
I'm so true.
I don't like that feeling of feeling, people feeling sorry for me, but also I think for the most part, just thinking about it lots and thinking about my situation and how I grew up and where I am now, that a lot of other Black people might be going through the similar things or have been through similar things. And, I didn't grow up hearing a lot of stories that were similar to mine, because I think there is that shame factor that happens. But
so true.
I feel safe with you, and I feel safe in the little community that we have, which is Unapologetically Black. And I thought, let's talk about it. Let's get into it, because I think
it's amazing.
It's something that we should talk about, and I feel comfortable talking about now that I've grown a little bit. And it hasn't always been that way. Yeah.
And I think it's what you said, Ginny, because like we've been working so hard to create a safe space. And I think people, when they're going to talk about their stories, they have to do it in a safe space, if that makes sense. So thank you so much for that perspective. And I think that's so true to so many people's lives on this journey. So we're going to start getting into our questions, guys. I have quite a few questions ready to ask Ginny, but really it's just a sit back yarn, because that's the other thing with that most of our episodes, guys. It's really like structured, like we'll have a little breakdown before and get into it, but this is such a yarn, and it's culture for us, sitting back and listening to each other in these stories that we're sharing. So if you are non-Indigenous, you want to sit back, listen and learn and enjoy. So Ginny, let's get into this. What is one of your happiest or fondest memories as a little girl, or what were you like? What was little Regina like as a little girl, really?
As a child, I think I was a very curious person. I loved learning. Anyone who went to the Murray School with me knows that I was like the kid at school that was like a goody two shoes. I have always been the sort of person who cared a lot about what other people thought. I think as a child, I was very similar. I cared about like how my mum felt towards me, how my brother's sister felt towards me. And so I think like a very intuitive, curious little girl. I was really lucky. My mum raised me with really good manners. That was the one thing that she really instilled in us. And my grandmother would say to me all the time, like, Regina, that was the one thing that your mum really wanted you guys to have, was good manners, always saying please and thank you. And we were always really well dressed, even though my mum stole like half of our shit, like literally. She would come home with stuff and I'd be like, okay, where did this come from? But we were always the best dressed kids on the street. And
so beautiful.
Yeah, so it's I don't know, I guess for me, like, I think it's weird because I kind of see myself as a different person as well. Like, I don't know why that happens, but as a kid, I definitely felt like a very curious and very like people pleasing sort of person. And that's one thing I grapple with today, like really that balance of like when to not care about what people think, and then also so that massive part of me that just wants everyone to be happy and like me.
So true.
Still hoping that I'll get over it.
Yeah, and I read this crazy thing, Ginny. They said this psychologist said a lot of those traits that we have as children we struggle with as adults. So if it's talking too much, if it's not talking enough, if it's not understanding emotions, we still battle with those as adults. So that makes so much sense with what you're saying. So Ginny, let's get into that. Let's start discussing, those early years of your life. And as everyone can see, the title of this episode is From Foster Care to Fashion. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey, into foster care and what that looked like for your mum and your family unit at the time? And let's talk a little bit about the impacts that's had on you as a woman today.
Right, for sure. I think like my mum, she grew up as one of 6 children. My grandmother lived in Logan in Brisbane for a good 40 years. She's been very much a part of the community out there, and anyone who lived in Logan at that time would know who my family was. But I think my mum, being the youngest of 6 children, really struggled, I guess, with her relationship with my grandmother and grandfather. I think that for the most part, I don't know the ins and outs of those conversations that happen. And I think that's always a hard one when you come from Black families, like what is appropriate to ask and what's not. And how, I guess, the emotional awareness around it. You know, I feel like I've had lots of conversations with my grandmother, but when they get a little bit tough, she's like, oh no, we don't talk about this. So I can't tell you exactly what that looked like for my mum, but I can imagine that during that time in Logan, during the 80s, 90s, that it was not necessarily the greatest time to be young and Black.
So true.
But she found, I guess, look, she was looking for something. She found it in different men, whatever that was. So I have a biological brother and a biological sister. We all have different dads. And I think she struggled in her relationships with those different men. The last man that she was with introduced her to drugs. And I think then she found what she might have been looking for in drug use. So my mum was a very heavy heroin user. And obviously that then trickled into our relationship and whether she was capable of being a good enough parent for us, and being a single mum as well. I think she really struggled with love. It sounds like to me that's the only thing I can think of. So I was placed in foster care, in and out of foster care, probably from about 3 years old. So placed in respite, you know, I'd do a few weeks until mum got good. She'd go to rehab, then we'd come out and it would be okay for a few months. And then, you know, it was off and on. We'd stay with some family, come back. So for a good few years, we did that. And I guess around 6 is when my mum passed. So she passed from a heroin overdose. And I guess, yeah, it was a weird time because I can remember being young and I remember watching my mum using drugs and not necessarily understanding what it was, but
what's
that
going
it was
on,
right, but that it was also a very normal thing
Yep.
to see because we had been introduced. And I don't want anyone to think that my mum was a bad parent, because she wasn't.
So true.
And I think like that's one thing that I do struggle with, is like when you hear people like talking about their parents, especially Black parents, is that we don't know what they went through. You can only imagine, right?
So true. I can't, and it's just half the time I can't even imagine. So if your mum had you in the 80s, what was her life like in the 70s? You know, like we just got the vote, you know, a decade before in the in this country. So we can't imagine what those things look like, especially guys in Queensland of all places. It was just brutal, the racial segregation there. And I think we're talking about, sorry to interject, but that respect that we almost have for each other with Black fellas, like even if there are people in our communities that use substance or their, you know, whatever their journey is, whatever their addictions are, it's kind of like we just get it and we just kind of respect it, if that makes sense, because Western society don't do that.
That's right. And I think that's the thing, is that for a long time, like don't get me wrong, I was a child, right? So when I think about my nieces and my nephews, and I look at other children, and I think like, you know, obviously wasn't the greatest situation, but it also was sort of all I knew for a while. So it obviously has affected me as an adult. I've got lots of things that are, you know, quirkiness, things about me that I just have built because of my situation as a child. For instance, I hate needles, can't be around them. When I go to the doctors, I have a full-blown panic attack. For a really long time, I had to get my foster dad, to come with me to every single medical appointment because I was so scared. You know, I have a very addictive personality. I realized that that's something that I have, I guess, got from my mum, is that I can binge watch a TV show forever. Like I can procrastinate for the longest amounts of times. If I eat scrambled eggs one day, I will eat scrambled eggs for days on end. And
Yep.
I know that that's something that I have gotten from my mum, but it's also made me really aware of those things, you know, like it's
So
something that I think about. And I think, you know, for a long time I was angry as a child, as a teenager. I was really angry at my parent, well, like my mum.
Yep.
Situation that she put me in for leaving me as a 6-year-old. There's a lot of like little abandonment issues I have that I
Because when you're 6, it's like you can't process your normal emotions or atypical, like happiness and anger and sadness and, you know, greed and jealousy, like the normal kind of stuff. But then trying to expect a 6-year-old to process such grief and such loss and confusion. And I feel like that's exactly what you're speaking to right now, is just human capacity, and especially of children. Because that's a lot to ask, you know?
It is. And I think, you know, 15 years ago, I would have a very different opinion on my mum. But I think as an adult now, I have a lot of respect for her as a woman and as a mother. And I think she dealt with things the best way she knew how. And that, you know, I'm not going to hold that against her or anyone else in my family for things that they had no control over. So, you know, foster care became my life after that. When my mum passed, it was at that point I realized we weren't ever going to have a normal family situation. When my mum passed originally, I also was really upset with my family. And I think I wrote this in my email to you. I remember my mum passing and going to the hospital, and my my stepdad at the time was there, and I remember being like, everyone was crying. Like I literally can remember being 6 years old, being at Logan Hospital. I remember like how cold the room was. I remember who was there. I remember what, you know, like it's weird what you can remember as a child. And
so it's had a profound impact. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's why I think of little people, I think so highly of them at times, you know, like when I look at my nieces and nephews and I have conversations, I know they're listening, you know.
That's so true.
I think as adults, we forget that they are little people, and these things, they're going to remember these things. And we might be thinking like, oh, they won't remember this time that I did this, but we remember. There are things that we remember. But yeah, I remember being 6 years old, my mum passing and going to the hospital with my little brother, and everyone crying and being like, what's wrong? And my stepdad at the time said to me, oh, you know, mummy's gone to sleep. And it's something, AJ, that I've held against my family for the longest time, because for a decent amount of time, I literally thought she'd just gone to sleep. And this is, imagine, like, this is something that I was used to. My mum, when she would get high, she would fall asleep, you know? And I was like, oh, okay, like, she's gone to sleep. You know, my grandmother took us into the room, and I remember seeing her for the last time. Sorry, I'm trying not to get upset.
No, and sis, you need to cry. You let it out. I've told you that. Do not hold back. Everyone listening to this episode, everyone watching, everyone tuning in wants you to know that this is a safe space.
Yeah. I remember seeing her for the last time and feeling her and feeling how cold she was. And I was with my grandmother and my brother, my little brother at the time. And, you know, my grandmother just being like, say goodbye and give her a kiss. And that was the last time that I saw her. But I don't think I was allowed the opportunity to grieve how I could have grieved, I guess, as a 6-year-old. As best as you could explain to a 6-year-old the situation, right? And I think that's the thing, like, obviously for a while I was really upset with how I was told, but I understand as well that I don't know the correct way to talk to a child about how and what to say when a parent dies. But I just remember for a really long time being like, oh, okay, she's just gone to sleep. Why is everyone so upset? You know, she's gone to sleep. And it wasn't until like a week and a half later that I understood that she had passed, and it was because we were at the funeral.
I see. So you're just hit with that realization, what was happening.
Literally, everyone's here at this funeral, and there's a casket, and it was then I realized, okay, my mum had passed away, but even then I didn't really grieve in a way I think maybe a child should grieve, because as blackfellas, the best time, the time you see everyone is at funerals. That's the only time.
That's right. Everyone's hugging and kissing and catching up and looking at the babies, you know.
It was like the first time I'd
true.
seen everyone in such a long time that I was so excited, and I was at a funeral.
So true.
You know, to see my uncles and my aunt, you know, like.
It's so true though.
And everyone was loving on me. It was such a as bad as funerals are, it was probably one of the best days, because
that's right.
Everyone
in your little 6-year-old heart, you know, you would have just been like love, 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 and literally. Mob, you know. So that in even itself, Ginny, sounds really conflicting emotionally, because it's like I'm letting go, but am I celebrating as well? If that makes sense.
Exactly. And see, even now I think I have like this weird, as an adult, weird connection with funerals. Like I'm not really the sort of person who gets upset at funerals, or because as blackfellas, we know like funerals are every other week, you know, and
that's it, Ginny.
And it's the only time you get to catch up with everyone and see everyone. And so it's unfortunate that that's how that played out. But I think, you know, I've tried to not allow it to be the only thing I think of my mum. You know, I try not to hold it against her as a woman, as my mum, and it's definitely shaped who I am. But since then, I have been in foster care. So since my mum passed away, so 6 years old, up until I was 18, I spent in foster care as a part of the state of Brisbane, in Brisbane. And it was something I guess I don't tell a lot of people, because having dealt with what I've dealt with, and the abandonment that I felt, in my head I've created like this little family, you know, like always searching for family, always finding home. I think that's been my purpose in life, is like, what is home? What does home feel like? Who is home?
Who's your family?
Exactly. And so for the most part, I never really told anyone. I don't think a lot of people knew at school. Certainly through high school, I didn't tell a lot of people. Maybe just like my close friends would come over to my house and be like, "This is weird. There's lots of kids." But for the most part, as an adult, I don't think a lot of people know that I was in foster care for all of my life, pretty much.
Wow.
Because I don't want that either to just be my story, you know, like
that's so true.
Like, I don't want to be a statistic. And I think we hear lots as well as blackfellas, like, you know, we know we're in the system. If we're not in the foster care system, we're in the justice system. If we're not in the justice system, we're in the health system. And that's where most of these stories come from and collate. So I never really have been the sort of person who has, you know, talked about.
On into that. And the label, sis, you know, from a young age, it sounds like you've been really conscious of recognizing that you'll have that sticker just labeled on you, or that judgment. And like you said, sis, it's tying back to what you said very early on. You don't want people to feel sorry for you, you know, because we do in our society always look at anyone that doesn't have a nuclear family as, you know, oh, well, poor you, or, oh, you know, that's so terrible, or this, that, and the other. And sometimes we don't need pity. We just need you to recognize it.
Right. And I think as well, like, I remember my mum being so embarrassed about having children in there when she would call, or when we would visit, that she was so embarrassed that we had to meet at a park, you know what I mean? Or like that we could only meet between these hours, and people would have to be around. So I sensed the stress and the pain that it was for her. And in turn, it made me
carried that for all those years, like a little
shame. It's shame.
Personality trait from shame, exactly. And generation upon generation, that concept of shame and protectionism is. So thank you so much for that, Ginny, providing us that, look into your life and that, honor and respect and recognition of the role as your mom, of your mother in your life, and the impacts that, her journey had on you, and then later her loss. But again, I feel like a really big element of this yarn is, Ginny, often as Black fellas, we just want to pay honor and homage to our people in our family, and especially, our parents and our kingship system as well. But in doing that, Ginny, I feel like sometimes we keep putting that respect and honor into them, but not ourselves. We neglect to respect us and what it was like for you being that little 6-year-old all the way up, like you've said, until you were 18, navigating this foster care system and what that brought into your life, and even the loss of your mother, because I'm sure to this day you're reminded every day that she's not there, and that presence in your life. So getting back into that, Ginny, I want us to talk now more about you. I want to hear what it was like for you being little Regina, going through this system, literally that lifestyle that you knew with your mum, going in and out of care, going back, good, bad days. What was it like having that rug pulled beneath your feet? And use this as a space, Ginny, to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, I guess I got so used to moving around so much that I didn't really think too much about how it was going to affect me for the rest of my life. And I guess as a 6-year-old as well, you're probably not thinking too much about even tomorrow. But I know that I didn't have a home. And like I said, I think, like we touched on earlier, that's been I know that that's my life purpose. I feel like that's the one thing that I'm searching for in my life. Like I've narrowed it down to, like, we talk about the pursuit of happiness and what that looks like as different people. Is it money? Is it love? Is it family? Is it mine is what home? I'm literally looking for home. And, I think it's ironic, my whole life I've just been here, there, and everywhere. And even now I'm in another country, you know what I mean? Like, and now I feel like maybe this isn't home, and maybe home is back home in Brisbane. I don't know. Maybe home is my grandmother, or home is my brother, or home is, my partner, or, home, it could be me. And I just haven't figured that out yet. But it definitely shaped the rest of my life for sure. Foster care is not fun,
No.
and I think we all know that. I think as Blackfellas, we've known that since the beginning of time, since the beginning of colonization.
That's
foster care, being taken away from your parents, has always been a traumatic process. And I think of foster care, unfortunately, as a stolen generation 2.0.
So true.
And I think that, I don't want to compare any of my experiences to the stolen generation, because they're two very separate things. But I think we're seeing the impacts of stolen generation through this next process of foster care.
So true.
It's not been the greatest situation ever, but I will say that I have been lucky and fortunate in a lot of ways as well. It hasn't been all bad, but it hasn't been all good.
No. And speaking of not all and not bad and good, there are going to be a lot of listeners, Jenny, that unfortunately have gone through this process. And I'm sure the message overarching is that you're providing is the complexities behind it. And that's why it's so essential that our government and our country recognise the children that are falling through the cracks and the experiences that impact them to the women and the men, or they, them, that they become in our society. Because that's the thing, I feel like the same thing with the stolen generation and with women like you and other people in my own personal life is it's just swept under the rug. It's just, okay, next file, next case, next home, next family, without really delving into that. So if an overarching explanation, or do you want to provide us an insight as what has been the impact of that system, or that notion of just being another child in the system and being a Black one? What has that had on you as an adult, as a Black woman today?
I mean, for me, I've missed a lot of things, right? I've missed a lot of the family connection. Although, like I said, I consider myself very fortunate. I did always maintain a very good relationship with my grandmother and my cousins, my aunts, my uncles. Thank God. But I know that doesn't always happen.
That's so true.
So I consider myself fortunate in that space. I've always had a very, very strong connection to family, and I know who I am. I have a very strong connection to my identity, who I am, who I come from, where I come from. Thank God. And I know that that's not the same for a lot of other Black fellows who are placed in the system. It has changed the way that I interact with men. It has changed the way that I my relationships with men, particularly white men. We, like, when I was in foster care, there weren't many Black families at all.
Yeah. That's
so
right,
Black foster families. In fact, I didn't see another Black foster family until I was about 8.
Wow.
So before then, I was in lots of different situations, homes with white families. And so that was really different, going from like a Black family where you're loved on, and
so true.
You know, I slept in rooms with my cousins. I slept in, you know, with my uncles, everyone. We slept in the same room. You ate when you wanted to eat, you know,
it's
like
so true. Dig around in the fridge.
Exactly. Things that you take for granted. You're out all day, you come in, and, you know, I went from like that to being like, this is your bedroom, and this is where you sleep, and this is, you know, it's just a whole different way of life. Oh, we use knives and forks like this, you know. I remember like conversations like that. I remember, no, you don't just go to the fridge and get what you want. You need to ask, you know, or you need to, you know, like just weird,
That's right.
Weird things that I remember as a child being like, oh, like, okay, so this is very different.
New,
very new, very different. And I consider myself fortunate because I think I picked up on those things really quickly. But during my time in foster care families and coming across other, you know, Black children, noticing that some of them other Black kids weren't adjusting to the situation. You know, I often will have times, and even now as an adult, where I think, I wonder what happened to him, or what happened to her, because they didn't adjust in the way that, you know, maybe I did, or some of the other people that I interacted with. So it's given me some PTSD in a lot of ways. I can
imagine,
in a lot of ways. And also, you know, unfortunately, I did experience sexual abuse at a very young age in foster care. And I think a lot of people will be surprised that I say this, because I have not ever really told anyone. And again, it's about shame, and it's about,
that's right,
what often happens to victims when they experience sexual abuse. You know, we feel like it's you know,
that's right, it's your burden,
that it's your fault. And I've had to struggle and live with that my whole life. And it's obviously affected my relationships with people, and when I've been in relationships.
That's right.
I think it will continue to affect me for the rest of my life. And when I have children, how do you explain to children that there are people out in the world who
so true,
who will tell you and expect you to trust them and feel safe with them, and they will take advantage of you as a child.
That's right.
Even as an adult. So
that's right.
It is giving me a lot to think about, a lot to deal with, but that's the foster care system.
That's right, Ginny.
And my story is not an original story. It's not one that the first time that I'm sure people have heard this, or the last time.
It's so true, Ginny.
And I've only probably really started dealing with that in the last year.
Wow, it's so powerful.
Yeah, and the thing is that the foster care system is such a small world when I was growing up in it, that I was with my abuser, I want to say like just a few months before my grandmother picked up on it very quickly. And it was so weird because I haven't never asked her where that came from or why that happened the way that it did. But I've still have seen him. I've still seen him
It's
out and
terrible.
about, and I know him, and it's something that I've had to experience being a teenager in his presence before by myself, and really
Terrible.
freaking out, not knowing. And I think as kids as well, like for a long time I convinced myself it was a dream. For a long time I convinced myself that it wasn't real.
That's right. Did that really happen?
Literally, I was like, I know that this didn't happen. And I remember one night I was at another foster family, and it was really dark, and I just was crying because I was so scared. And she came in, my foster parent, and said to me, "What's wrong?" And I told her what had happened to me, and she was just like, I just remember her response being like, "Now's not the time to talk about this. Like, go to sleep."
Wow.
And
so it's just further trauma upon trauma.
Again, just not really dealing with the situation. And I think as well, like there were moments that I probably tried to reach out as a child that needing support and needing help, and it just not being met with the sort of love or care that you would want a child to be met with. But
That's exactly
again,
right.
this is the foster care system. And again, I consider myself fortunate because I know of other foster care kids that I grew up with, who I consider my brothers and sisters, who have been through some terrifying stuff, horrible stuff that no kid should ever have to go through or be through. But I think like, despite the fact that my mum passing at a really young age and in a way that has traumatized me for the rest of my life, but it's taught me a lot of things. In a lot of ways, I've been really lucky that I haven't been able, held it against many people or myself as much, because I've been able to compartmentalize things. Like, for instance, my mum being a user and passing away, I think, how would my life be if she hadn't have used, or if I try and see, I guess, the positive in every situation as much as I possibly can. So I know that I am a very strong woman. I know I'm here's the thing.
True.
The things that I do know about myself, I'm a very independent woman. It's something that I'm proud of. And I know a lot of men are like, oh, independence. Like, that's the problem. True. Oh, a feminist.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
That's right.
I will never, ever worry about not anything. I do worry a lot. I worry about things like stability, security, things that you worry about, but for different reasons. For instance, I will always be okay in terms of money. I've always been pretty good at like making money, but also very frugal, and also very creative because I don't ever want to have I don't ever want to have to worry about what's next. I don't ever have to worry about struggling, because I know that I will pull my shit together and I'll do it, because that's all I've known, and that's what I've seen, right? My relationships with men have been a little bit strange in the past, and that's because I know from watching my mum how she loved people who couldn't love themselves and loved them to death almost. My mum, I remember growing up and seeing my mum experience domestic violence a lot, and that's shaped the way that I interact with men now. Like, I see red flags, and I also don't see a lot of red flags, because there's a part of me that I saw in her that wants to help everyone to the point of like ruining myself and ruining my own self-confidence and stuff like that. So, there's things that I'm like, obviously this is a shitty situation and what you don't want for a child, but it's taught me a lot. You know, I know that I'm a strong, independent, hardworking
That's right.
woman who's am very capable of going out and doing what I need to do. I mean,
And let's give some background here, Ginny, because if you guys don't follow her, I'm a little bit of an stalker of Ginny, but I have seen you do home renos. I've seen you take care of those dogs. You know, I remember talking to me about their diet and all of the thing and traveling with them. And do you know what I mean? You're doing home renos. And guys, when I'm talking home renos, I'm not talking about like, oh, let's put like my home renos, like let's get a new rug, you know, on the floor mat in the or a new toilet roll holder. This girl DIYs, guys, like she does it all. So it's like that thing with you, Ginny, is just like, I want to do this and I'm going to get it done. It's like almost an ambition with you and a drive.
I'm very impatient. You know, this is the things I've learned about myself. I'm very impatient. I don't want to wait for Prince Charming to come along and screw a hole in the wall. I can do that.
Yeah.
I'll do it for myself
that.
every single time. You know what I mean? I
Incredible.
don't, you know, I'm very happy to watch a YouTube video and try and change out a fan and kill myself. Like, it's not, you know, I just am very, I don't want to, the things that I love the most about my mother are the things that I don't want to be like at all.
So profound.
And, you know, when I think about who I want to be, it's the absolute opposite of my mum, even though I think she was a wonderful woman who had a lot of demons. I don't ever want to be a parent like her. I don't ever want to rely and depend on men like she has. I don't ever want to have to need and want for things ever. Like, I'm happy to be the person who does that for myself, and it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, right?
Yeah, it's so true, because you can shoot yourself in the foot with that just defiance, you know, just refusing to even let people get too close. And I feel like that is such a big thing with many Indigenous women is we just want to do it by ourselves. We're just going to get the job done. That makes sense.
My trust is like very thin. I don't have time for it. I'm very impatient. I don't trust a lot of people. I don't tell a lot of people stories about my life. I don't. Yeah, it's that's that flip side, is that we then become products of that environment and so the vulnerability. I don't rarely let myself be vulnerable. Yeah. Because I see weakness in that, unfortunately.
So it's so powerful, because we're going to get into that now, Ginny, with this concept of your art, you know, and your journey, because I feel like all of those qualities that you've just described, like hardworking and independent and integrity and truth and embodiment, is just being captured in Ginny Girls Gang, and the strength of women and feminism and being proud to be a woman and going out there and getting the job done. Because at the end of the day, guys, we are dealing with when we are looking at different collectives and being Indigenous women, guys, we're looking at a multitude of different factors here. So we're living in a goddamn colonial country that's misogynistic, and men are just put on these pedestals and women will never amount. So I feel like all of these elements have contributed on your journey. And even in the business that you're in now, the art world in this country is notoriously known for being dominant and being led by men. You know, if it's curators, if it's, you know, artists themselves, if it's critics, if it's anything. And the fashion industry as well, which are deeply embedded in. So let's get into that, Ginny. How did art find you, and how did this, because it's a very different thing to be doing art at home and doing, you know, doing it as relaxation or leisure, but having that drive, Ginny, to push it and to create it into something such as a business. And guys, let's also reflect. We're in the age of Instagram, so it's hot, it's heavy, it's everywhere. But when we were growing up, it was not existent, guys. Seeing art on mugs or art on T-shirts and hoodies, you know, that was not happening. Maybe you'd get one printed down at the goddamn markets from China, but we did not see black fellas in their designs on clothing or things that we could really purchase other than canvas. So would you love to tell us a little bit about how you found art, when you started, and when that moment kind of switched that I can make it in this business?
Right. So I think for me, you know, I have a very famous great uncle that was an amazing artist. He passed away last year. Reginald Knox is his name. And I spent a lot of time with
That's
Uncle.
royalty. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
I
Wow,
spent
God, this is my first time hearing this.
Yeah, you didn't.
Wow.
I spent a lot of time with him as a child watching him
Wow.
paint, and anyone who knows my Uncle Roy, who got the pleasure of meeting this man, he has paintings in the Vatican. Like he's a
Yes.
very famous artist, and
Hey, guys, he's royalty. Like I learned
Yes.
about him in high school, so I'm like starstruck right now.
and he's just been the same beautiful. Like I got my skin name from him. There's so many moments in my life that I shared with this man, who's probably was the strongest male figure I had in my life. My immediate family. So it's my grandmother's brother, younger brother. And so I spent a lot of time watching him paint. He taught me how to paint. He came to our school and did the mural. If you live in Brisbane, and you went to school in Brisbane, then you've probably seen a mural by my uncle Roy. It's very, very the most amazing artist, and not very humble man, like the sort of person that would happily sit down and have a cup of tea and talk about anything. But I was really, really lucky that I was introduced to art by my uncle. And that's where I think most of a lot of people in my family have painted for a really long time. But for sure found my love of art through him and how he worked with people. I saw when he would come to school and all the kids would come around, they got to put their hands on the mural, and he would tell them about different Dreamtime stories. And I just thought, this is a man who loves what he does and it is inspiring, and he was just the coolest person ever, person ever, and I always looked up to him. So introduced to art by my Uncle Roy, and then loved to do it. But for a really long time I actually stopped painting because my aunt passed away. My aunt and my mum were very, very close in a lot of ways. They looked similar. My mum actually, funny story now. This is how
you want to hear these stories?
This is how you know you're black. My aunt and my mum, right, they look very similar. But my mum got into a lot of trouble. She went to Bogoro jail, and she spent a lot of time in there. But I remember one time my aunt and my mum stopped talking for a really long time because my mum used my aunt's name when she was pulled over by the cops. And so my aunt ended up doing time for my mum in jail. Oh my God,
this is so black.
So black. She was pulled over and told, no, you're going to jail, because my mum, her name in when she got arrested. Anyway, that's a whole other story. So very similar. And I was really lucky that I got to spend a good amount of time with my aunt and hearing stories about my mum through her and my grandmother and stuff like that. But we're a very creative family. We always have been. And so I guess that's how I was introduced to art and storytelling and all of that sort of stuff. And I've just loved
the culture.
That's how it happens, right? Sitting around drinking tea with toast and yarning. And so my aunt passed away, and she didn't have a lot of money, and we didn't have a lot of money. And I know that when she passed, she would not have wanted us to spend a lot of money. So instead of getting like a deadly casket, we got the most basic casket that you get. It's pretty much like a box, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we got the casket to the house, and me and my cousin sat there for 2 days painting the casket. So we painted her casket, and I painted. It was a great way of grieving, right? Because you had to sit there with this casket in the garage. It was a really strange situation, but we painted that casket together, and I stopped painting for about 5, 6, maybe 7 years. Yeah. Stopped completely. It just didn't feel inspired anymore. Just didn't feel like I wanted to do that sort of work. Like I needed to sit with myself and think about why I was doing, what my purpose was. And also I just lost the the love for it. You know, it was just too, it was weird, a weird situation, but I actually, stopped painting for about 7 years, and then went back into it when I felt like I was in a better space. And now, you know, I love, for me, art, we call it art. For me, I just think like it is storytelling, and that's why I do what I do. I want to tell the stories of other people. I want to tell my story. I want to tell the struggles and pain and the loveliness and the dark that is being Black.
Powerful.
And I wanted to do that in a way that didn't just sit on the walls of a gallery, because, you know, like, I have a lot of appreciation for artists, and I just think, especially as Black artists as well, you know, I feel like we're not represented as well as we should be in these industries. True. You know, like, you know, we know as Black fellas that our paintings, you know, and our old people's paintings will go for hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know.
So true.
But the rest of the world doesn't see that. They can't really appreciate the 60,000 years of work that's gone into this very story that you're looking at right now.
It's exactly right.
And so in a lot of ways, I was trying to figure out where do I fit into this, and how can I make an impact, or how can I tell you my story or other people's stories or our stories, and shove it in your face and give you something to think about. And that's how Ginny's Girl Gang came about. Random moment, but I just wanted to figure out how can I do that, and that's how it came about. So I started painting on a jacket. Organic. My best friend, it was her birthday. I'm a really shitty, I've told this story before, but I'm a really shitty friend, and I'm not
relatable. That's how we get on.
Literally, I'm like not very good at remembering things. I'm not very good at like being sentimental, because it's not really a thing that I do. But one of my really good friends, Waveney, she actually is the most thoughtful, sensitive, beautiful person. Like she'll see something and get it for like 6 years from now. Like she thinks about these things. And so she was her birthday, and she was coming to the US, and I had just moved to the US, and I wanted to do something for her, because she tells me all the time, you're a shitty friend and you're shitty. You're relatable. Shitty. Yeah, she's literally like, you're just very bad at picking presents and stuff. So I was like, this time I'm going to make an effort, and I painted her a jacket, and it said royalty on the back, because she is one of those women who has always inspired me. She's always been like unwavering in who she was and her identity, and she doesn't give a shit about what people think about her and what she says and does. And so I created this jacket for her, and she came and she was like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. And
incredible.
It was at that point I was like, maybe I'm onto something. Maybe I'll do another one. And then it just started, but
growing.
Yeah, it started growing. And then you know, Ginny's Girl Gang, like I called it Ginny's Girl Gang because I am an aunt, and that's been the most important role in my life. It's something that I'm really, really proud of. You know, I don't have children of my own. I have 2 dogs that I love a lot. We love. But my nieces, the first little loves of my life, you know, I see myself in them. I see myself at 4, and I see myself at 6, and I see myself at 8. And I just think,
so true.
You know, I think we know as Black fellas, the matriarch has always been something that's super important and special, and they are going to be the next matriarch. That's right. They are the new ancestors. Yeah. And so, you know, my relationship with my aunt, I only have one aunt, was the most important relationship in my life for a good 10 years. You know, he kept me connected to my family, and she kept me connected to who I was and my mom. And I learned so much from her, how to be like unapologetically myself, and unapologetically a Black woman, whether that was you were angry or sad or mad or passionate or any of those things, you know. She was the strongest person I knew, and one of the strongest role models in my life. And I want to be that person for my nieces. You know, I want them to come to me I could tell her anything, AJ. You know, we all, as Black women as well, we all have a woman in our life that we
So
can
true.
go to, who are those people in our lives, and generally they are an auntie if you're lucky
That's so
enough to have
true.
one. And so my nieces and we call ourselves Ginny's Girl Gang, and I just thought this is it. They're the next
Something
matriarchs.
there.
Yeah, they're the new ancestors. And I've thought about changing my name because obviously when I first started my business, I didn't expect people to actually like my shit.
Yeah.
But now I can't, you know, it's my identity and who I am. And also it's the legacy. It's my legacy for myself, but also for my nieces and any young Black woman or just Black woman in general. I hope that when they come to Ginny's Girl Gang or they see my work, that they see parts of themselves in it, because that is essentially what it's for. It's for us and by us. And I'm really lucky that I get to do this sort of work, and that can be something that I tell in my lifetime. That this is exactly.
Because that's what you're doing is, like, guys, this is another backstory. So I saw a jacket. I saw a real life jacket. I believe I was at some Indige event or like a Yarbin or something, and I saw a denim jacket. I'm not sure who. I'll probably, me and you'll yarn about that later. But I saw a jacket and I saw photos of these jackets. I said, who is the artist? Who is the artist? Who is this person? And then I found out it was you.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, of course it would be a woman that would paint like this. Of course it would be a woman that is creating these images and this connection, and they're innately spiritual. So I think that's the other thing about your art, Ginny, is that spirituality and that energy you're placing into it. And I guess that healing as well, because me as an Indigenous woman, just looking at your art brought me such a sense of respect, and I wasn't even wearing it. So we can feel it, girl. Speaking of feeling it. So what was the merging though? Okay, so what was the ability that you had to be like, you know what, I want to get into this fashion industry, or I want to pursue this, and I want to have it on clothing, and the differentiation between the canvas, Ginny, because I feel like, again, this is something that is so fairly recent for our people in Australia, and I feel like even globally with the experience in the Americas and Canada, I'm seeing a lot of other Indige artists over there coming alive with their designs, and even the Pacifica as well. What was your moment of like, you know what, I want to pursue this industry and I want to go down this journey with my art? Because I feel like a lot of people that want to go into business or go into the fashion industry or any white space want to hear that, because it's brave.
Do you know what, for me, I don't know if there was a particular moment, like I'm trying to think, is there a particular moment that I was like, oh my God, I'm going to do this? Like, no, you know what it was how I felt when I did it. And, you know, I think, you know, I don't get to talk a lot about the process, and hope, you know, I want to explore that more, because I think that that's the most important part, not necessarily the jacket and the product afterwards, but what happens in between when someone reaches out to me and says, I want a jacket, I love your stuff. It starts there, number one. So that feeling of like, oh, wow, you like what I do and you respect what I do, the most important part. But then what happens from there is, in order to be a good storyteller, to purvey, is it purvey? What word am I thinking? Portray. Thank you.
Yes.
Portray the story that this person wants to tell.
That's the thing,
What needs to happen is a transaction of energy, you know?
Yes.
And for me, that is the most spiritual thing that you can do, and what our people have been doing for the longest. So when we talk about storytelling, it's like, well, what is storytelling? You know, storytelling is a feeling, it's an action, but also what it means is that there is a transaction of energy. Like I have to want to listen to your story. You have to want to tell me your story. So there's a level of vulnerability that happens. And I think that's why I don't necessarily give my story to a lot of people, because I take on other people's stories and tell their stories in a way that I think is really, you know, unique and beautiful, powerful, and portrays in a way that does justice to people's stories. But it is also the single most ancient thing that we can do, is sit down and listen to each other, and we've been doing that since the beginning of time. Black people have been doing that for 60,000 years, right?
So true.
So, when you talk about seeing my stuff and feeling like a spiritual connection to it, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. Like, that's exactly, and it's not even me, right? It's our ancestors.
So true.
I think it's the most beautiful thing that we can do. So there is a level of vulnerability and trust that goes into people coming to me and telling me their story and why they want their jacket to say this or why they want it to look like this. And I think I'm an empathic sort of person. Like,
definitely
pick up on those sorts of things. And I think that that's what my purpose is as well, is like
so powerful
to portray those sorts of messages. And that's why I think it was at that point, the transaction and feeling like I was able to do something. This is my public service. Does that make sense?
And cultural continuum. You're continuing culture. And let's get into that, Ginny, because I feel like another big thing is each artist has their own process or their own method or their own energy. What happens to you when you're alone, like at 3 a.m. or 1 o'clock at night, or even in the day and you're with your canvas, or even a canvas, because I know you do that as well. But if you're with a jacket or a purse or a wallet or a backpack, what is that feeling like? Do you feel vulnerable? Do you feel calm? Is it out of body experience, or are you focused? What's the energy like?
It's different. Hey, it's different every single time. It depends. Like, it depends on the story and the meaning, really. But there have been times where I've like not been ready to do a piece, or like there have been moments where I'm like, I'm just not getting this, like I just don't. But essentially what I do is it's like a prayer, really. I just sit with it. It's weird and
so
I think
powerful. Thank you for sharing this with us, because I've never heard you talk about this before.
It's not something I talk about a lot, but generally what I'll do is I'll sit there and I'll just go, if anyone's listening to me speaking right now, please let me portray this message in a way that does justice to the person who wants this jacket. Please come to me and help me put, like I just talk into I guess our ancestors. And I don't want to sound like a crazy person, because that's not what it is. But I think it would be the same thing. It would be the same thing that I would do with my grandmother, and that was like, tell her, how do I get through this, and how do I make this make sense? And essentially I just have a conversation with myself about what's next. And every time I've ever had to do that, it's worked out.
Wow, it's so profound.
It's really weird. It's a really weird, not weird, but it's really it's special for me. It's special. And I can only
imagine.
I treat everyone's story with as much respect as I possibly can, and I try to see things from everyone's point of view. And I think that's why it's
such a success, Ginny, and why you are where you are, and why you are continuing to grow and blossom and support. And the other thing is, Ginny, a lot of your jackets or majority of them are for First Nations people. They are for Indigenous people. And I think that's an amazing point as well with your business, because as you guys know, I talk a lot about commodification of culture and identities and yada, 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 but it's kind of like you're doing the opposite. Right. You're empowering or giving back that gift of our culture or our ways to our own people, and getting them, reconnected in themselves. Like I said, when I saw your work in real life, in the flesh, it's just profound. And so we're going to move on to our final question. And we've gone on this journey where we've talked about, the horrors of the foster care system and how that's impacted you. And this is conversations, guys, that we could delve in for hours and hours and hours. And I feel like as First Nations people, the ugly side of this nation is one that we have to look in the face of every day. But there are people, like you said, sisters, those other children that went through this system. Some of us have to look at it in an even uglier way. So there are going to be people that are listening to this episode, or there are people that may be in relationships or have children themselves that have gone through, very horrific traumas. What would your advice be for these people that are listening to this? What would your advice be for someone that is trying to live with and trying to work through and want to make something of themselves when they can today, tomorrow, in 5 years, but they just want to make something of themselves like you have.
I don't know, honestly.
It's a hard one.
It is a hard one, because I think that you're the best storyteller for your story. You know what I mean? Like you're the best person to tell that story. No one else is going to tell the story the way that you need it to be told, or you need for your story to be heard, right? I think of myself very lucky that I'm able to help people to portray their story, but can never be replicated the way that it's been told to me.
So true.
And which is, another reason why I wanted to sit down and have this yarn, because I know that there are probably people out here, a lot of Black fellas that I come across in my DMs who message me, and a lot of foster families even that message me and say, without even knowing my story or who I am, and have been vulnerable with me and told me things. And that this is why I wanted to have that conversation, because I think it's an important conversation to have. And I think that there's so much that we can learn from each other, and also learn from being vulnerable. Like I'm not the sort of person who loves, again, telling my story to everyone, but I think for the right people, and for the right ears, that hopefully this touches you or touches someone in a way that makes them feel a little bit stronger and proud of who they are. I think that that's the thing, is like we hear that whole products of our environment sort of situation, and in a lot of ways we are. A lot of that, though, is we have to acknowledge that a lot of that is colonialism.
That's right. 100%.
And that had this been pre-colonization, that the story may be very different. And I don't like to dwell on things too much, but I think it's important to acknowledge that this is not
the impacts.
This is not
what
was meant for us, but something that we now have to deal with, and that we also need allies and first people to get on this train and walk with us and hear us. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, AJ, but
no, you really are. You really are.
I just think,
and it's right. It's like you said, it's to the individual, because like it goes back to what you were saying at the beginning with young Ginny not talking about this at all, is we don't want to be labelled, you know, and even with our advice, we don't want to be, oh, well, you do A, B, C, and D and you'll be on your way. Because as we know, as Black fellas, it don't work like that.
And, I think it's important to recognize as well, like some of the times that I have been vulnerable with people is that, you get what people would consider a compliment, like, oh, and look at you now, look how much you've grown. And I'm so proud, I consider myself very fortunate. I have to say that from 8 years old to 18, so the next 10 years of my life, I was with one foster family. My foster mum is an Aboriginal woman who worked as a bus driver at the Murray school that I went to. So serendipity happened, and I got to go home with her and live with her family for the rest of my life. And my foster dad, she passed away as well, unfortunately. My foster dad, I have a very, very close relationship with. And I've been he's a white man, so this is, again, you can think of this however you want to, but this is a white man who's raised 10 Indigenous foster children himself, and by himself for the last, 10 years now, 10, 12 years. A great man who's taught me a lot about myself as an adult, and a lot of that, I consider myself very, very lucky. It's not all doom and gloom, but
so true.
I think it's important to talk about the impacts of foster care, that there are going to be, like you said, AJ, a lot of Black children who are falling through the cracks. And don't get afforded with the opportunities that I have been afforded to, because a lot of it is just about time and place. You know what I mean?
True. And how your stepfather or your dad has come into your life, and it's so profound, Ginny, because it's like that constant reminder through life is we have to work on an individualistic level, right? We have to focus on that person in front of us, and I think that is so true with your own story. Is like, you know, we know Ginny now in this moment, and
Right.
the Ginny that she's growing and evolving to be, you know, and watching your growth is an internal and an external thing, because you're growing inside as well, like sharing your story with us today.
And I think as well, like, if for anything, you know, I like to think that despite the fact that, you know, again, it's not all been rainbows and lollipops, but I feel like, you know, in a lot of ways I was put through some of these things because my ancestors felt like I could deal with it. And maybe that's why I need to have this conversation. Maybe there's someone who's listening who understands what I'm talking about. And that, you know, again, like we yarned a few weeks ago about International Women's Day, and that whole thing about being a strong Black woman, and how we are raised, even as young Black women, to be strong. But sometimes strong isn't all that you need to be. You
So
know,
true.
sometimes it calls for, you know, for vulnerability, and it calls for passion, or it calls for sadness, or it calls for anger. And that we don't just need to be strong Black women. We can be whatever the fuck we want to be, and we get to choose what that looks like. And it might not suit your narrative right now, but that's just how you're going to get it. And
so true.
yeah, so shout out to all the strong Black women.
Yeah,
that's not all you need to be. Sis. That's not all you.
That's it.
And that's
and your journey has been that, Ginny. What a growth and what a journey it has been, and learning to navigate these emotions in these spaces and these events. And I think that's what so many people and women, and especially Black women, taking away from this is going to know, is that it is a journey.
It
if
is.
That makes sense.
And you will, yeah. Thank you. I feel so much lighter now that I've.
Oh, thank you. Well, we're going to close this out, guys. It was an absolute honor, Ginny, listening to you spread your story and, you know, spread awareness around this facet that so many, you know, Indigenous people have been horrifically embedded in, and putting a face to that as well. It's not, we're just not numbers. We're not just goddamn case files. We're real people. So thank you so much for that. And guys, if you want to see another episode like this, if you have any more questions about Ginny's life, we have a whole season ahead of us. So if you want to hear more about Ginny's life like I do, please get the feedback back to us. Let us know in our inbox, because this woman has a story to share. And thank you so much, sis, for trusting me to, you know, host you today. It was an absolute honor.
I'm so glad that I got to do this with you. And any questions, any comments, would love to hear from you guys.
For sure.
Sorry, it was a little emotional. You might need a little coffee after this, sis. Like, don't let this be, if you're driving in the car, the next traffic light, it stops now. You know, we all need to move through this, unfortunately, but we will get there.
And that's it. We're unapologetically Black, guys, and, you know, we are providing you a peek or a look into our lives, and we want to be realistic as we can. And thank you so much, Ginny, for doing that today. And guys, always remember, we aren't claiming to speak for anyone, any group, any collective, any family, any tribe, any nation. We are speaking for ourselves, and what power there is in that. So thank you so much, Ginny.
Thank you, sis.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Unapologetically Black. Be sure to follow us on our Instagram at unapologeticallyblack. You'll find our merch, contact details, and content in the link tree of our Instagram bio. In the meantime, please share, like, and subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels. As Black creators, we're incredibly grateful for your support. Big love, take care, and yarn next week.